Welcome to the podcast where we track down Australian war veterans, have a chat with them, and hear their stories. I'm Alex Lloyd, and this is Life on the Line.
They were building positions in there
if
for a
anything happened
fight.
to us, by the time anyone got to us,
I think it was chaos.
the weather was so bad there would be
I used to
nobody
run
left.
with boots full of blood.
And the next thing I hear was alarms,
Chances of
screaming.
survival were very, very slim.
The soldiers didn't want to go into the ambushes, so they'd send the kids in first. And so he was sent in first into an ambush and he got shot in the stomach.
It was very hard for me, very hard for my family.
And the plane burst into
Proud of the
flames.
crew, proud of what I've achieved and what I'm doing.
Volunteer for service was in effect to put your life on the line.
Welcome to Life on the Line. I spent a few days in Melbourne interviewing some Navy veterans of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. During my visit, the Frankston Naval Memorial Club kindly invited me to their weekly Friday night event. It's a casual get-together for members of the club to reminisce with each other and their partners about their Navy days and swap worries. I took a lapel mic and spoke to a few members about their time at sea. I apologise in advance for the background noise, it gets a bit loud in places. I sadly had to cut a couple of conversations because the background noise just became too much. The first few clips featured here are brief extracts from some of my conversations, and the final interview is longer than the others with the club's president, Harry Kime. Harry had quite a few interesting stories. And on Friday night, members of the association gather in their very nice club, have a yarn, have a drink, and I'm interrupting their evening to come and chat with some of the members. What's your name?
Hayden Whitfield.
What year did you join the Navy?
I joined in February of 1966.
What was your first deployment?
HMS Queenborough, which was an old North Atlantic English frigate.
What was your role on the ship?
I was an ordinary seaman, jack of all trades and master of none.
Where did that take you from there?
I did about 9 months on that, and then I came down to service and did a cook's course and finished that in about August of 67, I think it was. Spent a couple of months at service and went to Lonsdale, HMS Lonsdale in Port Melbourne.
And when were you next at sea?
That would have been in 1968. I joined the Anzac and spent about 18 months on there.
Were you escorting the Sydney round, or?
No, not at that stage. I just missed one trip that they'd escorted to Sydney.
So what was the Anzac doing at that time?
When I was on it, just doing an Australia circumnavigation, ports of call, showing the flag as they called it. On 25th of January 71, I got a draft to the Sydney.
Okay. That's when Sydney went downhill.
And were you on Sydney as a cook?
I was on Sydney as a caddick cook then, 3 months in the main galley, and then I got put up into captain staff.
Sydney would have been old hat at its ferry runs by then. Did you come across anything a bit uncomfortable, a bit out of the ordinary, or it was smooth sailing?
A bit iffy at the start, first time. And
for yourself personally?
Yes, for myself personally. Wasn't quite sure what to expect. It wasn't so bad, probably in the first week going up. Once we got within 2 or 3 days, things starting to tighten up in the ship and you could feel the atmosphere change, And that's when I started to notice things were a little bit different. Once we came in and we anchored, we were pretty well quick unloading and quick loading back up again and scooting out again. So, there wasn't too much going on.
Did you interact with any of the troops that were...
Yes, the younger ones, of course, which were probably about my age, give or take, 20, 21, 22. They were pretty vocal about things that they did, and they had a few souvenirs which were a little bit...
Questionable,
to say the least. Probably shouldn't say what they were, but, I'll tell you, one was a human skull that they brought back. Why, I don't know, but...
And whose and how,
Yeah. So they were a bit uptight the first couple of days, but after they settled in, they were...
And by then, more of them would have been national servicemen than not.
I would think that the majority of them were nashos. You only get a sprinkling of regulars. But they were very happy to be on their way, and you could see the tension and just drain out of them after a couple of days, Once they were away from the land, and they actually knew we were heading home, they relaxed quite a lot.
What's your name?
Bernie.
When did you join the Navy?
I joined in October the 23rd, 1965.
Just like it was yesterday?
Just like yesterday. It goes that quickly. It really does.
What was your first operational deployment?
Vietnam.
On what ship?
HMAS Sydney. For a year. I did 2 trips to Vietnam. And then come down and did my course. I was a cook.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I won't say tucker-bucker. Yeah, fitter and turner, they say. Fit it in the oven and turn it, you know. But no one ever died of starvation or died of starvation or
food poisoning?
No, that's right. No food poisoning. No, I was surprised. You know, you in the canteen. They always had a lot of gastro from the canteen. But as far as I know, they never went hungry. Put it that way. I had a captive audience 3 times a day. I enjoyed it, and I think every young person should do at least 2 years conscription. So give a bit of discipline. The young kids of today just haven't got a clue, and a lot of them, you'd get a lot of them probably staying in the services, you know, with the Air Force, Army, and say, oh, it's a good life, good pay, and you meet new friends and things like that. So yeah.
So finish school and do a year or 2 national service, then move on to whatever.
Yeah, that's right. They should all do it. Everywhere, a lot of other countries overseas do it, and they'd probably give a bit of discipline to some of the young kids.
Anyone sitting here?
What's your name again?
Alex.
Alex, Brian. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Brian. Brian, do you mind if I record you?
No, go for your life. So what do you want to know?
How do you look back on your career in the military today?
You weren't even a twinkle in your dad's eye. Bugger me dead. I suppose you enjoy the camaraderie. I've still got mates around the country, which I still join. I ring up and it's just like, saw them yesterday, haven't seen them for 15 years, thereabouts. I suppose when I left I was fairly bitter because of the way the promotion went. In my time, the Navy became a gutser. They've in the 2000, when I went down there to teach again, they were teaching a course to make the electricians on par when they left the Navy to give them a career path in the civilian world. It worked in one way and it didn't work in another. You can't equate a naval electrician to a person outside. My son's he's an electrician, okay?
Civil electrician.
Sorry, my grandson. Yeah, a civil electrician. He knows lots of things about the rules and regulations and switchboards. But I say to him, go and fix the fridge. I don't know how to do that, Pa. What about the washing machine? Oh, I can't do that. How do you do this? Because that's what they do. A naval electrician or a naval maintenance person, they have to learn and they have to have the basics to fix everything, from TV sets to, it doesn't matter what it is. Because electrically, you got power in, it does something, it works or it doesn't. So you've got to be able to sit there and work it out.
Creative problem-solving skills. You're the only one on the ship.
That's right. Or the people like me, and you can't be trained for everything. So what you do is you train the people in basics very thoroughly, so they understand what's going on. You know, I can teach you hydraulics. I can teach you pneumatics. Pneumatics, if you don't know, is the engineering of air. Okay, they call it pneumatics. Hydraulics is oil. Okay, electricity is electricity, naturally enough, and then mechanical is just mechanical things, gears, wheels, diesel engines, suck, squeeze, bang, blow, suck it in, you squeeze it, you spray it, explodes, mechanical turning, all that sort of stuff. You have to be able to teach the person through training during his career and also a good part of his workup, the things he's going to run across and make him competent to do it. You know, I'd get these kids before they went to sea and I'd scare the shit out of them.
What is your name?
Richard Kime, K-I-M-E, but I am known more commonly as Harry Kime.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Bushey, which is north of London, but on the perimeter of London, in Hertfordshire, in 1939.
Do you have much memory of World War II as a small child?
I do, yes. Although I don't remember the first house we lived in. That was bombed and destroyed, but we weren't in it at the time, so my mother and I survived, obviously. And we moved into another house in an adjacent suburb called Watford. And again, that was bombed, but we weren't there when it got hit.
Thankfully.
I do remember that place because I remember that, you know, after it was bombed, somebody had stolen my bike, you know. There was looting, of course, in the war. I also remember a doodlebug, you know, a V1 landing on a factory opposite where me and my mother were staying. And in fact, if she hadn't turned around to go to the toilet at the last minute, we'd have been standing at a bus stop that was flattened in the explosion. So I had a lucky escape with that. Yeah. And when that bomb, that doodlebug landed, they used my grandparents' shop as a casualty clearing station, and I took tea to fellas who'd been dragged out of rubble and that, you know.
Did you have any family serve in World War I?
Yes, my grandfather served in the Navy in World War I, was at the Battle of Jutland.
Second largest naval battle in history.
Yeah, an ordinary seaman.
Still at the Battle of Jutland?
Yeah.
On what ship?
Tiger.
And did you have any family in World War II?
My father served in the Air Force in World War II. As a ground, he was a radar bloke. He did serve in France, but as the Allies moved further eastward, he was in the mob who sort of came 100 miles behind them, sort of thing.
Just behind the lines?
Yeah, well, yeah. He didn't have any traumatic experiences that I'm aware of. Him and my mother divorced shortly after the war, and I've had no contact with him ever since.
And you never got really much of an inkling why?
He took off with a French barmaid.
So that was war-related?
It was war-related, yeah.
I see. When you were growing up, did you have any inclination to joining the military yourself? Do you remember?
Not initially, but I, like all kids in post-war years, I used to read Boys' Own magazine and things like that. And of course, you know, there was always heroic deeds being done by somebody or other in the book or the comic. By the time I was in my early teens, I decided I wanted to join the Navy, and I actually joined the Royal Navy at 15. It was HMS Ganges, which was a boys' training establishment, which was fairly authoritarian, but I had been at boarding school for about 5 years before that, and the discipline in the Navy wasn't too different from the boarding school anyway. I didn't have a problem, you know.
What was your first at-sea deployment?
I went to a submarine depot ship in Scotland. I was sent to it because I was in the upper academic level of the boys, and the ship had a schoolmaster, and me and two others were sent to it to do the the training or the lessons for the higher educational test, which in due course we passed. It wasn't a very exciting ship. It spent most of the time swinging round a buoy, you know, with submarines coming alongside, but the ship itself didn't really go anywhere much. In the 18 months I was on there, we went to Bermuda, and we went to Saint-Nazaire in the north of France, and we went to Belfast in Ireland, and that was about it. The rest of the time we were stuck on this buoy in Rothsay Bay in Scotland. I joined in 54, so this would have been 55, sort of 56, yeah. I got sent to them what they called the Far East, of course, and you know, Southeast Asia. I was in what they called the fleet pool. I was in a group of signalmen and telegraphists who used to get lent to ships as replacements when either somebody was sick or they'd been taken off to do a promotion course and things like that. And so in the time I was out there in 18 months, I had quite a few ships. I was on 4 destroyers, a fleet auxiliary, which was a stores carrier, a cruiser, a frigate, and a couple of shore bases that were, headquarters places. All in all, I think I had about 11 moves in the 18 months, which wasn't very good because it took 7 months for my kit to catch up with me.
So you were just one pair of underwear and pants?
Pretty much. When my kit did arrive, it was so mouldy, it had to be entirely replaced. I didn't have to pay for it to be replaced because it wasn't my fault that it had, caught on me.
Walk me through the next 10 years or so of your, what are some highlights from your career?
Well, in the Royal Navy, I spent time in the Persian Gulf. There was, long before Saddam was a problem in Iraq, there was another fella called General Qasim who decided he was going to take over Kuwait, and we went up there and we were helping, I guess, to deter him from going into Kuwait on the ship I was on, which was HMS Saints, a destroyer. We had quite an interesting time there. We actually caught a gun runner who was trying to take, guns into Kuwait, and I think the Kuwaiti police shot a lot of them. And we caught a slaver. We'd gone to Bahrain to fuel, and we came out at 2 in the morning, and we came up behind this ship, or a dhow, and when we hit it with a searchlight, they dragged these Africans out of the hold, and we're going to chuck them over the side. But our boarding party got on there too quick for them, and we handed them over to the Bahraini police. And it was about 6 months later, we got a signal, we were in West Africa by that time, to say that the Bahraini government hung them all, the slavers. We did two trips in that ship, escorting the royal yacht with the Queen on board, which was interesting because you get to go to some nicer places and sometimes a bit odd. We went to Liberia, for example, Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. Very strange place because they were freed American slaves, the origin of the Liberians, and they had, all the buildings were very much like sort of 19th century America. Beautiful facades with a tin shed behind it, sort of thing. And the women and the blokes dressed up were wearing the clothes of the 19th century. The blokes had stovepipe hats and the women crinoline and all that. Yeah, were very odd though, very odd, yeah. I came to Australia in, about 58 on a ship from the Far East, and I met my first wife, and she subsequently came to England. We got married, and when I finished my 12 years in the Royal Navy, I discharged in Singapore and came from Singapore to Australia.
Did you discharge from the Royal Navy with the intention of joining the Royal Australian
No,
Navy?
not initially. No intention of joining the Australian Navy. I hadn't even thought about it, quite honestly. Not because I had anything against the Australian Navy, just I thought I was going to start a new life doing something different. And I was going to join the West Australian Police, but the pay was pretty woeful and by this stage I'm a married man with 2 kids, and I thought I can't really, survive on that basic pay. So I inquired, and they said, well, you can't have a second job, but you can join the Army Reserve. And I said, well, I don't want to go in the Army. They have a Navy Reserve? And the bloke said, I suppose so. And to be fair, somebody found out for me. So I went down to see about joining the Naval Reserve. And when I got there, the bloke was another pommy bloody looking for a handout sort of thing, until he found out that I was, by this stage, what they called a yeoman of signals. And the Australian Navy were very short of them, and he said, if you come in, you'll get your old rank back virtually straight away. And the pay for a PO in those days was £35 a week, which was much better than a copper's pay of 22. So it wasn't a hard decision. So I joined the Australian Navy, and I got to say, I was very pleased I did, and I enjoyed just about everything thereafter. The first ship was the old Anzac, the battle class destroyer, which of course I'd been on battle class destroyers before, so I was well versed with how the ship worked and all that sort of thing.
Familiar territory.
Yeah. And then I went to the Supply, the tanker, because I got promoted to chief. Now, I would never have made chief in the time that I did in the Royal Navy, but because the Australian Navy was so short in my category, as soon as I'd done 4 years as a PO, I got promoted chief. I had to pass tests and that, but that wasn't that hard,
And I imagine pay went up a little bit. And
yes, it did. Yeah, in fact, I guess I had a sort of charmed life in terms of promotions and that, because I always seemed to be eligible at the time vacancies were suddenly appearing, So I did Anzac and Supply in one posting. Then I went to Singapore in a shore job for 18 months. Then I came back and I went to HMAS Sydney, the carrier, which a lot of people use, but I was there when it was decommissioned.
When was that, 74?
About that, I can't remember exactly, but I remember I got the signal that out of the blue, said it will be announced. This was at about 10 in the morning. It said at 11 today it will be announced in Parliament that HMAS Sydney is to be decommissioned immediately.
So you joined the famous Vung Tau ferry, one of Australia's greatest ships, and then you're Not on it for very long.
No, we were due to go to Vietnam in about another 2 weeks after this date, but of course it didn't. I took the signal to the captain and I thought he was going to pass out. He wasn't a captain I got on very well with anyway. So then after that, when it did decommission, I went on HMS Vampire and finished my sort of 2 years or so at sea on the Vampire, which was probably the best ship I ever served in. No, I had a couple of more different shore postings, but then I went back to sea. I got promoted to warrant officer, and I went to sea again on the fleet commander's what they call retinue. I was the Admiral's warrant officer signals, and I went wherever the Admiral went. I had the secret codes and stuff. Not quite the bag with the bomb in it, but.
Which Admiral?
First one I was with was Leach. He was a nice fella.
David Leach?
Yeah, lovely fella. And then the next one was, I did it again another time. I went with Admiral Woolridge, who had been the captain of the Vampire, and it was a particularly enjoyable time. And then Rear Admiral Woolridge, he did like to get around. I mean, in the 18 months I was with him, I did 52 helicopter transfers and jack stays and all that. I think we visited damn near every ship in the fleet, except for I only went on 2 submarines, and they were both stationary submarines, not going anywhere. I came back to Cerberus, but then they introduced a scheme where certain warrant officers got booted upstairs to be a lieutenant, and I was one of them. After that, I never left Cerberus after I was a lieutenant. After a brief spell working for the executive officer as his sort of staff officer, I went into the training world again in the communications school, and for the next 10 odd years I never left the comm school. I finished up as the officer in charge.
And what have you done in the last 20 years?
I never had a job. I've only done volunteer stuff, and I've been very involved with the Naval Association, predominantly here.
You're president of this association. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yes. I sort of fell into the job in the first place. I'd been on the committee, and the then president wanted to stand down, and nobody else sort of seemed interested in doing it. So I said, I'll do it. And I was the president here for a couple of years, the Naval Association of Australia, the Frankston subsection. But I was also our delegate to the state section, and I became a state vice president. And when the state president got promoted to become the national president, I got booted upstairs to become the state president. So I did 3 years as the state president until I stood down, and then came back here and virtually sort of resumed my old job as the subsection president, and have been that now for another 2 years. Yeah. And probably for a little longer too.
You never stop giving. When you're in the service, it's a life of service. And even when you're finished, you're giving back to your fellow comrades.
Yes, I regard it as comradeship more than anything else. Social inclusion is important, and I think that what we do, we do look after people, particularly people with genuine welfare problems and so on. We try to sort that out. We're just getting people together. And it's surprising how a chat with old shipmates and what have you is very therapeutic for some people,
It's a bond that never really fades.
Well, one of our mottos is once Navy, always Navy, and I think that's a very fair description, albeit that we stole that motto from the Royal Navy.
It's been quite a life of service, Harry. Thank you for speaking with me today.
My pleasure, thank you. Yeah.
My thanks go to Harry Kime and the Frankston Naval Memorial Club for hosting me. Get in touch with this podcast on social media. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Life on the Line Podcast, and on Twitter at LOTLPod. To find out more about us, visit www.lifeonthelinepodcast.com, and to get in touch, just email podcast@lifeonthelinepodcast.com. Life on the Line is brought to you by Thistle Productions. Artwork by Big Cat Design, music by Dan Van Werkhoven. Thanks for listening, and lest we forget,